needed.
Hi, this is Simon Candlish and welcome to another Marvelous Videos. I hope you've all been doing well, and if you've not felt nostalgic in a long time, you have clicked on the right video. Today we'll be talking about a very deadly character from a video game which you all must have played, or at least heard of. And that is none other than the god of Muay Thai, Sagat, from the game Street Fighter. Today we'll be talking about everything there is to know about him, starting from his origins to his skills and why he truly became the antagonist in the first place. So tie up your Muay Thai belts and get ready for some content full of emotions and action. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The origins of Sagat, the entire backstory explored. Originally created by Takashi Nishiyama and Keiji Inafune, Sagat was only referred to as the main boss of the game, Street Fighter, for the longest time until the character gained significant depths to his backstory, and ever since then, Sagat truly has been one of the fan favorites of Street Fighter franchise. Sagat had a passion for brawling from a young age, but numerous street fights as a child damaged his right eye, with serious wounds that soon turned into a weak spot. He quickly began practicing the martial art of Muay Thai to develop his strength and self-discipline, after realizing that learning to fight on the streets was not the best option for him. His bulk finally turned into a benefit as he matured and recovered from a string of setbacks in his early career, and by the age of 15, he was able to fight his way through the ranks as a deserving champion in the Muay Thai world. After defeating the previous owner of the title, Muay Khan, upon seeing his furious battle between the two legends and how Sagat was able to beat the previous title owner, Muay Khan, Adon begged Sagat to take him under his wing and make him Sagat's pupil. Sagat was never really a bad person, but he was blinded by range to such an extent that even if he did something wrong, he would not realize it until it was too late. Sagat would take part in his first title defense a year later, which happens once a year. His main competitor was none other than Go Hibiki, a masked man who did not reveal his real identity even after he was asked for it several times. This act of insincerity made Sagat a little bit frustrated. Sagat decided to brush this off and carried on with the fights. Sagat made an effort to encourage Go in a fair fight, but Go quickly began aiming all of his blows towards Sagat's right eye because it was vulnerable. When one of Go's blows struck and gouged out Sagat's right eye, Sagat became enraged and countered an incoming clinched knee kick with a brand new move called the Tiger Shot, which drew upon a huge power buried deep within him and destroyed Go. After the battle, Go was declared dead. This revelation left Dan, Go's son, in tears and rage, and he swore to get his revenge on Sagat one way or another. Ooh, he really went from 0 to 100 real soon. But all this was just the backstory of our favorite antagonist. But hold up, there is so much more to be talked about. After this came the time when Street Fighter series actually started. Sagat organized and held a World Warrior tournament. But what he did not know was that someone was going to steal his title from him very soon. One day, news of a teenage martial artist named Ryu, who had defeated 20 Muay Thai fighters, started to circulate. Sagat agreed to take on Ryu's challenge to protect Muay Thai's reputation. Sagat was severely injured and had a large scar across his chest when Ryu overcame him with a nearly deadly Shoryuken. Later on, this scar would come to be associated with him, almost like a brand. Sagat could not accept this reality where he had been defeated and swore revenge on Ryu. From here on out, he became the main villain of the series. After the massive hit of the game Street Fighter, his story soon got a sequel in the game called Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter Alpha 2. Sagat left the world of Thai fighting after the surprise loss and started training alone, but because of the shock of losing for the first time, his training involved directing his rage at a tree. Nothing like a little old tree punching, am I right? After being offered a position in the organization, M. Bison had promised him Shadaloo resources to track down Ryu. and gives Sagat a rematch. Thus, Sagat eagerly joined the nefarious group called the Shadaloo. One of Shadaloo's feared 4 heavenly kings, Bison, appointed Sagat as his bodyguard due to his nearly unstoppable abilities. He then started looking for Ryu right away so that he could tear him into pieces. Sagat exacted revenge on Ryu in the chain Street Fighter Alpha events. Despite being happy that he got his revenge, he had a strange empty feeling after the fight. This is when he realized Ryu pulled back his attacks, and Sagat noticed that Ryu didn't give it everything and did not truly understand why Ryu would not give it his all. Sagat eventually abandoned his grudge after seeing how dumb and meaningless it was. But then Bison's aircraft showed up. Sagat had defeated Ryu, but he wanted the fight to be fair and wanted to battle Ryu on even grounds. But Bison remarked that if he wanted to be feared, he would need to master Psycho Power. Sagat quickly overtook Ryu in Street Fighter Alpha 2 and challenged him to a duel. Despite Ryu's protest that Sagat hadn't fully healed from their previous encounter, Sagat persevered and prevailed and finally beat Ryu. But soon he concluded that Ryu had allowed him to win because after the match, Ryu had remained silent and had only given him a mysterious stare, leaving him with the uneasy feeling that the triumph had been empty in some way. Sagat was determined to work even harder the next time to win with no mistakes. He practiced the Tiger Blow, which would eventually become the Tiger Uppercut in his finish. I just love the fact that Sagat has an unbreakable willpower, and honestly, all his moves are so clean and smooth. In fact, even in the game, defeating him was one of the hardest things to ever accomplish. Even after being defeated in a humiliating way, and after being given a win out of mere pity, he kept on working harder and harder without any shortcuts, and honestly, if every one of us had even 1% of this mentality, we would accomplish much more than what was accomplished right now. Well, I got a bit carried away. So let us continue further into this story. Dan Hibiki, now an adult seeking retribution for his father's passing during the fight with Sagat 10 years prior, was another person Sagat faced. During the match, Sagat kept on thinking how Ryu actually let him win just so he could give up all his anger and hatred, and felt a sense of kinship with Dan and purposely threw the fight without letting Dan know about it, so that Dan could let go of all the hatred in his heart and move on. In Street Fighter Alpha 3, Sagat understood that Ryu's possession by the Satsui no Hado was what caused his scar, and that Ryu was not himself during the fight. He realized Bison's genuine motivations and concluded that true rivals shouldn't let wrath and hatred mislead them or seduce them. Soon after Bison granted him his wish, Sagat could now have the rematch he'd always desired after Bison gave him a brainwashed Ryu. Sagat continued to combat Ryu despite his disappointment at having to face a corrupted foe while attempting to free his rival Ryu from Bison's mental control. He pleaded with Ryu to resist such betrayal because a real warrior wouldn't. Ryu broke free from Bison's grip and, by rejecting the Satsu no Hado, temporarily vanquished and chased Bison away. Sagat at last understood that rivalries needed boundaries. Sagat informs Ryu that the corruption nearly ruined him and that he is not yet prepared to face him once more. This made Sagat a way stronger fighter than Ryu at that moment. After making a promise to return when he's a genuine master, Ryu departs Sagat, and Sagat understands that Ryu must be defeated, but not for retribution. No. This time, it was for his own survival. It was his need to fight Ryu, or else he would not live completely. Ryu and Sagat are quite literally like the Goku and Vegeta of the Street Fighter universe, starting off as enemies, ending up being controlled by a bad guy, and ending up as rivals. This continued on till Super Street Fighter 2, where Sagat admitted that he wanted to train even harder and become the strongest fighter in the world just once more, before he got way too old for fighting and winning against others. What was it Sagat really like? His appearance? Like every video game character, even Sagat had his multiple wardrobe changes, and his bulky physique has some minor to major changes as well. And the same applies to his personality. So let us see how drastically the character has changed over the years. Sagat is distinguished by his commanding demeanor and enormous muscular frame. He is dressed in Muay Thai trunks in a variety of hues, including purple with yellow trim, blue with red trim, and blue with yellow trim. Additionally, he sports the hand and foot wraps that are prevalent among among Muay Thai practitioners. Sagat is the fourth tallest character overall in the Street Fighter series, behind T-Hawk, Hugo, and Abigail, standing at 7 feet 5 inches. Additionally, there is some evidence that points to Sagat's gigantism disease and the cause of his ginormous height. Sagat's long reddish-brown hair from his youth is depicted in one of his alternate costumes from the Street Fighter. He either lost his hair over time or shaved them off on purpose at some point. Or maybe both. He also had a Monko on, and honestly, from a few angles, he looks eerily similar to Tengen from the Demon Slayer. Sagat has worn a black eye patch over his right eye ever since it was gouged out during his fight with Go Hibiki before the events of Street Fighter. And of course, we cannot forget them. The diagonal scar Sagat has on his chest, which is given to him by none other than Ryu himself. Oddly enough, he doesn't appear to have either of these wounds in Street Fighter 2 versus animated series. And yes, Street Fighter has comic and anime adaptations as well. In Street Fighter Alpha 2, Sagat Epilogue depicts him wearing a white muscle shirt, grey slacks, and grey fingerless gloves. Balrog appears in the same scene wearing the same attire, suggesting that it might have been an official Shadaloo uniform. Honestly, the ending was one of the most badass ones we have ever seen. The Street Fighter franchise has produced so many amazing and mind-blowing games that they were considered to be way ahead of their times, and they were even considered the most enjoyable games of all time. Sagat's appearance in Street Fighter V largely doesn't alter. He now sports a pair of ragged dark blue capris with an orange and yellow belt, as well as a short green cloak and matching arm and foot wraps. His chest and limbs are covered in tiny scars. His first alternate costume is his original violet and green outfit. The eye patch is just replaced with matching pink cloth bandages. And the second costume he wears is the same as his present one, but it's ochre with gold trim. His tie is capri blue, and he wears a gold necklace with a sapphire stone on the front, accessorized with a loose white necklace with rose motifs. Personality. Sagat displays the conventional traits of a proud fighter, being extremely strong-willed, powerful, and dedicated to martial arts in both body and spirit. His inherent size, according to the several biographies, inspired him to develop into a strong combatant. Sagat's unusual physical feature give the impression that he is menacing and playful and being unpleasant, which is somewhat accurate, but not completely. He has a tendency to channel his feelings into raw strength, just like he used his anger and hatred towards Ryu after Ryu injured him and gave him that massive scar. Similarly, he was consumed by rage when Go unfairly gouged out his eye, which made him go crazy, and he ended up murdering Go on the spot. But one honorable trait of Sagat was that he soon realized all his problems and sins and even highly reflected on them, which made him change. An elderly priest from Sagat's village, who appears in the Street Fighter's prologue, witnessed this development. Despite the fact that Go Hibiki took out his eye, he still harbors great regret and resentment for his past transgressions, particularly the murder of that man. This is also why he lets Go's son Dan get his everlasting revenge. Another example of his generosity may be found in the Street Fighter Tekken, as he aids Dalsim in locating and rescuing kidnapped villagers. Sagat even declines the powerful power of Pandora, even when it's offered to him, saying that a king like him doesn't need the strength of the gods, and placing the protection of their kids first. While Sagat respects opponents who are honorable and courageous, he hates those who use unfair or dishonest tactics to gain the upper hand. He would even bow down to enemies he thought were worthy of it, but he would brutally belittle others if he saw even a hint of mischief or unfairness. This gives him the attitude of a perfect fighter for real. Looking back at his comic book story arcs, the Udon comics, the main adversary of Chun-Li's ministries is a young version of Sagat. He is presented in this series as being even more vicious and cruel than even his early iterations, acting as Bison's enforcer in the covert theft of priceless treasures. In all other series, he is shown as a hybrid of his various incarnations, remaining noble despite choosing to be a Shadaloo member as opposed to his alpha incarnation. In this version, he wants to fight Ryu again, but criticizes his organization's tactics and cautions Ryu about Shadaloo, telling him that their intentions are not to be trusted in the slightest. Following his defeat by Ryu, he started training with Dalsim and grew significantly stronger, even startling Ryu with his new power and advising that he practices with the yoga master as well, which would give him immeasurable strength. He hosted the preliminary matches for the Chinese branch of the Street Fighter tournament and gave Fei Long and Chun-Li a entry if they could defeat all of the martial artists who made it through the preliminary rounds. Soon, by the end of the series, after facing numerous challenges and defeating every single one of them, Sagat finally got to have his long-awaited rematch with Ryu. They battled furiously, both landing and dodging attacks and occasionally surprising each other with the massive power-ups they gained before and during the battle. By the end of the match, Ryu won the battle and left Sagat defeated yet again, but this time things were a little bit different. This time Sagat truly accepted his defeat, and the two parted ways on good terms. He was last spotted leaving Shadaloo and working out to become even better. We can clearly see that Sagat is one of the characters who's had so many story arcs, and his character development is phenomenal. Starting from being the evil antagonist of Street Fighter, he soon became an ally to Ryu, and can also be sometimes regarded as a protagonist or an anti-hero of the series. Sagat in the live-action movies. Street Fighter the Movie. In the movie Street Fighter the Movie, Sagat is given a full name, which is Victor Sagat. He is portrayed as the bodyguard for the crazy tyrant General Bison and an underground mob boss and ruling dictator in Shadaloo City. Sagat was portrayed as Ken's rival in the games as opposed to his rivalry with Ryu. In this movie, a civil war had broken out in Shadaloo, a country in Southeast Asia, between the armies of drug baron turned General M. Bison and the Allied Nations, under the command of Colonel William F. Guile. Allied Nations relief workers had been kidnapped by Bison, who was demanding a $20 billion ransom from Guile through a live two-way radio broadcast in 3 days. Guile rejected and swore to find Bison and bring him to justice for his crimes, but his assistant, Sergeant Cammy White, was only partially successful in locating Bison outside the city in the River Delta area. Sergeant Carlos Charlie Blanca, a buddy of Guile's, was one hostage that Bison had ordered to be taken to his laboratory so that his enslaved doctor and scientist, Dal Sim, could create the first of his super soldiers. Although the treatment left Charlie with a severely damaged appearance, Dal Sim discreetly changed Charlie's brain programming to preserve his humanity. In Sagat's backstory, Sagat, formerly known as Iron Fist, ran the Shadaloo Tong, which oversaw the city's illicit activities after retiring from cage fighting, where he gained his popularity in the first place. Ryu and Ken were a couple of con artists living by selling fake things to rich people. They both tried to sell him a fake gun, but Sagat discovers the scheme and has them both slain. Sagat was extremely offended by the betrayal and wanted the two of them gone for good, but Ryu and Ken were not ordinary weak con artists. Up until Sagat's armed bodyguards intervene, Ryu and Ken are able to beat Sagat's men into submission. Sagat, who is impressed, intends for Vega, his best buddy and the current cage fighting champion, to face Ryu and Ken next. The fight was decided and everything was going according to Sagat's wishes, but before Ryu and Vega could fight, Colonel Guile made a surprise appearance by crashing his battle tank into the arena. He took everyone by surprise and Sagat had no other option than to surrender. Colonel Guile took Ryu, Ken, Vega and Sagat to the Allied Nations headquarters for further investigation. In prison, Sagat once more commands his soldiers to beat up Ryu and Ken, but Ryu and Ken successfully repel them until Guile, Cammy and T arrive. Hawk recognized them and decided to enlist their support for the Allied Nations. By arranging a prison break and forging Guile's demise, they gained Sagat's trust and received a homing device. However, the scheme was soon discovered by news reporter Chun-Li, whose father was murdered by Bison, and her team, former sumo wrestler Edmund Honda and her boxer Balrog, who were seeking retribution on Sagat for destroying their careers. They attempted to kill the two warlords at a celebration despite Guile's protests, but Ryu and Ken prevented the assassination and revealed the plotters to Bison in order to keep this faith. When Bison got back to the base, he accepted Ryu and Ken into his organization, ordered by the imprisonment of Honda and Balrog, and had Chun-Li brought to his quarters. Balrog and Honda were soon freed from their incarceration by Ryu and Ken, who then hurried back to attack Bison while he was fighting Chun-Li. However, Bison managed to escape and release sleeping gas, knocking them all out. Oh my god, things are getting so complicated now. Guile made arrangements for his attack on Bison's base, but the Deputy Secretary of the AN blocked him and informed Guile that the decision had been made to pay Bison the ransom. But Guile and his obedient troops nevertheless carried out the mission. Dal Sim was soon discovered at the base by a security guard. During the subsequent battle, Charlie was set free. and he murdered the security man to save Dalsim. When Guile got there, he entered the lab covertly and ran into Charlie. Just as Guile was about to kill Charlie to put an end to his suffering, Dalsim came in and intervened. Just when Bison was about to release Charlie on the innocent people, Guile confronted him and started to battle. Sagat and Vega determined that Ryu and Ken brought Guile and his troops. Thereafter, they eventually arrived just before Charlie was released and decided to ambush and murder them as payback. Before Ryu shoved Vega away and Sagat was punched aside by Ken, who located Ryu after becoming separated from him, Sagat and Vega cornered him in the locker area and were about to beat him up. Then, as Ryu and Vega are engaging in combat, Ken and Sagat engage in their own conflicts in the base's gym. At first, Sagat seemed to have the upper hand in this battle, almost easily tossing Ken around the gym until Ken used some equipment to injure Sagat. This caused Sagat to fall on the floor after hitting a wall. Before Ryu and Ken left, Ken gave Sagat a sarcastic present and told him that if he had not met Sagat and seen his true nature, he himself might have turned out to be like him. In order to avoid being apprehended by the AN as the base collapses, Sagat abandoned Vega and fled with DJ through a hidden route. They escaped the explosion just in time and swam across the river to the shore with a trunk full of Bison's cash, only to discover that it was full of now worthless Bison dollars. Even though this version was not as honorary as previous adaptations, he was clearly loved by all audiences. He also featured in a few other Street Fighter animated series. Street Fighter EX series. Sagat was distraught after dropping his championship title in the first official Street Fighter competition. He could not explain how a young fighter's bizarre attack had cost him the victory. Sagat's sadness and shock provided M. Bison with the perfect opportunity to enlist him in the Shadow Lu army, where his rage could be used to mold potential troops. Sagat took the job in order to achieve a goal in his life, but he couldn't help but think of the opponent who beat him unconscious and tore open his chest. He was curious about Ryu's hidden ability and desired to own it for himself. This constant thought of Ryu almost made him lose his sleep. With his pupils, he practiced day and night ruthlessly to perfect new moves and develop his strength. Sagat appreciated the day he would issue Ryu a second challenge and defeated him mercilessly. Sagat was not informed of the existence of a second EX tournament by M. Bison since he was required for an operation in a separate country. Sagat begged Bison for a chance to face Ryu when he eventually learned of the tournament's existence, but an angry Bison ignored his plea and instead dispatched Vega and Cracker Jack ahead to look into it. Bison soon decided to leave for the tournament, and after hearing Sagat's plea, he finally gave in and allowed Sagat to go with him. Sagat mentally prepared for the battle ahead of him and quickly dispatched most of his opponents while concentrating entirely on his upcoming confrontation with Ryu. Ryu made sure to contain the strength of Satsui no Hado when he and Sagat clashed once more. They battled for a long time, making each other almost collapse from exhaustion, but Ryu did not tap into his dark forces. Without doing this, he just could not muster up enough strength to fight the huge opponent standing against him, and soon Sagat prevailed and defeated Ryu. Sagat's triumph over Ryu felt hollow because he had already established what he was suspecting all along. Despite having defeated his adversary, the scar will always serve as a reminder of the victory that had been taken away from him. He chose to compete in the third competition to demonstrate that he was once again a champion. What makes Sagat such a powerful opponent? Sagat is a skilled Muay Thai fighter known for the Emperor of Muay Thai. His height allows him to launch long-range attacks. He can take his opponents by the heads because of his enormous hands. He is blind in one eye, yet it hasn't affected his ability. And on top of that, to make things even more interesting, he developed a number of assaults, most of which have tiger themes, which may be the reason why he also has a pet tiger. He has a lot of attacks, such as a tiger shot, which can be used while he is sitting or standing and shoots an energy blast towards his opponents. And if this is not enough, he advances this power and makes it 10 times stronger by turning it into Tiger Cannon. After being defeated by Ryu, Sagat really wanted to redeem himself and needed to come up with a counter to Ryu's attack. So he created Tiger Uppercut, also known as Tiger Blow. To go along with Tiger Uppercut, he also has a powerful move called Tiger Knee, and when he uses both of them simultaneously, he creates a new move called Tiger Genocide. But wait, what if that's not enough? What if someone is still strong enough to counter these? Well, Sagat is an extremely smart being and is an amazing tactician, so he developed Tiger Destruction, where he used all three moves, Tiger Knee, Tiger Uppercut, and Flaming Tiger Uppercut, which almost always guarantees his win against his enemies. Conclusion: Sagat is an absolute fan favorite, and it's clear why that would be the case. He is strong, badass, beat the main character's ass a couple of times, and his character has had so much depth and character evolution that it's hard not to like him. Even after being the king of Muay Thai and being defeated by a youngster, he never gave up. He continued to train repeatedly until he knew he was back on the top, which is something very commendable about him. All his appearances have been extremely unique, and honestly, the more we get of him, the better the Street Fighter series will be, because let us be honest, there is no Street Fighter without Sagat. And if you liked our content, well, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.